Hey, Luminary, I have a special interview for you today. I have Virgo High Priestess, April Monique, who is a visibility coach and healer, and how she really found that when she stepped back from being visible all the time and really fine tuned her energies to have more boundaries and to really trust herself, how showing up less actually enabled her to be more visible. So I hope you enjoy this interview where I talk with April and she shares all of her amazing energetic toolbox as she helps socially conscious entrepreneurs like you increase their capacity for showing up for themselves. Welcome to the Savvy Luminary podcast, Astrology for Entrepreneurs. I'm your host, Leslie Tagorda, creator of the Astrobrand Method, business astrologer, brand designer, author, and Aquarius boss woman. I help visionary spiritual entrepreneurs and impact makers like you illuminate and amplify your unique star powers so you can be the luminary you were born to be. Oh my goodness, I'm so excited to bring one of our first interviews in quite a while. Today we have April Monique, a visibility coach. She has so much Virgo energy. So of course she is a beautiful healer who helps soulful, socially conscious women entrepreneurs expand their capability for visibility. Oh my goodness. Hello, April. How are you?
Hi. I'm so good. And I'm so grateful to have this conversation today.
Oh my goodness. So I don't even remember when we met. Did we meet through a mastermind?
I think so. I believe
Okay.
so. That's
Because
when I remember.
yes,
Anyway.
I feel like with us spiritual entrepreneurs, we get connected in so many different ways and like we're in the same
Yes.
groups and we're doing similar things. And so I forget oftentimes how we meet. But I did an Astro Brand reading for you. I guess it was last year sometime. And you've been on this like amazing healing journey and also sharing your healing with your customers. Can you tell us more
Yeah.
exactly what you do?
Yes. So that brand reading, I believe it was like earlier this year in maybe February, and it came out of me wanting to work with you on you had a Mercury Retrograde offer. And so I signed up for that. And you said something on the call that I was like, we have to dive in because this is exactly where I am right now. Because what I was doing this year, actually, since probably early last fall, I started this journey of diving deeper. I was doing so much fucking healing. Like my makeup is all like I was in second grade doing personal development work. Like I am just like someone who consistently heals through life
Yeah.
and am always doing professional development and personal development. And then I started doing some inner healing work and I thought that I had gotten to the middle of the onion, so to say. And then
Mhm.
as soon as I decided, I don't know what's happening, but I just have to let go. And that is really hard for me. I've had like
Yeah.
so many moments where I felt like I had to let go of the control and just like let things flow. And I just couldn't get it done. I was trying too hard to just
Yeah.
be.
Yeah.
And so what happened was I decided to close my bread and butter, my counseling and coaching practice. I had a specific set or a separate energy healing work that I
Mhm.
was doing, but I hadn't really fully like stepped into that. That was more like my hobby at that point. And I decided to close my practice and take a bit of what I'm now calling a sabbatical from marketing
Yeah.
and visibility and being
Yeah.
online. And the most amazing things happened. And in the middle of all that, I had already been wanting to work with you. And then there was this opportunity where It just felt like it has to be right now. And so I signed up, and then you had said something about my Mercury retrograde in my
Yeah.
chart. What I got out of it was like working with people who are helpers, like help people so much, like what I would call in my previous line of work, like the rescuer kind of people, but people who really just like want to be there so much for others that they don't see where they're not being there for themselves, or if they are, they really aren't like able to grasp it. And I realized that I was doing that. And so when you were telling me in my little mini, what was it, like 4 or 5 minutes, I felt like that was life changing, because I was in the midst of this like journey of figuring out like all of this work I've already done with helping people out of their what I call cycles of drama, and like rescuing behaviors and having really soulful and sacred healthy boundaries. But then like taking it into this new direction of being able to really like see how when we are in that process with other people, we're not giving ourselves space to rest. Even when we sleep, we're not giving ourselves space to really like flow or be with ourselves. So then we're not really truly seeing ourselves. And when we're not seeing ourselves, other people can't see ourselves. So what I did was I just slowed the fuck down.
Yes.
And almost had to like do a hard stop, like to the point where I was working less than 12 or less than 10 hours a week. Some weeks I wasn't working at all. I had no idea how my bills were going to get paid. I sold my car because I live in a very walkable neighborhood. So I had been wanting to sell my car, but it was scary. And I finally was like, my biggest fear is that I will be homeless living out of my car. So I'm going to just remove the car from the equation. And I can't tell you how freeing that was, that I don't feel afraid to be evicted anymore. Because I removed that. I don't think that everybody has to do something so severe, but I sold my car. I stopped working almost completely. And what started to happen as I was doing this daily self-healing and really connecting back to myself and really like looking at how I was embodying my healing and how there was like the healing was already there. I just needed to allow it to surface and like allow some deeper areas to be healed. And then I was able to like allow more energetic people to see me more energetically. And
when I look at your chart, right? Like when I'm looking at your chart as you're talking, and I see all of these things light up. And so if you could just envision April's chart, is it okay if I share your chart a little bit, talk about it? Because April has all this Virgo energy. Her sun conjuncts Saturn right at the cusp between the 7th and the 8th house. 8th house ruled by Scorpio on the midheaven, right? So what we're looking at is like this deeply trust and spiritual healing as represented by Scorpio and in the place of the 8th house. But because your sun sign is in Virgo, there's this like bodily healing, this diagnostic that you need to kind of take through your body, and what you're talking about, that embodied healing. Saturn being right on your sun, it's literally about creating boundaries and structures on like what you have to say yes to and what you have to say no to. And then Scorpio there is like, we have to just eliminate everything that we don't need in here. So what you did, just to kind of reflect back to you about like, okay, I have this fear about, being homeless and living in my car. So let's eliminate the car. Like I'm working on visibility and seeing myself, but there's this wound that I have here. So let's eliminate that. And so in essence, what I'm hearing you say, all these things that you've had to do to heal yourself. And yes, you have this like clear signature of healing, not just yourself and others, but you're like living by example by like, okay, eliminate this boundary, this, eliminate this boundary, this. And so know that is so aligned for you, April, and just love it. Like that is part of like what you are here to do.
Oh, that's so beautiful and confirming. Thank you.
Yeah. And it doesn't
Yeah.
mean that you're not going to have fun. Like you still have your Mercury in Leo. So like you love having fun, you love talking about having fun, but maybe it's
Mhm.
not typical fun because yes, it is that retrograde there. That's how
Yeah.
that your Mercury in Leo is like, let's go talk to Leslie. this this
Right.
healing sounds a little bit fun because even though that Saturn, all of that Virgo perfectionism and Scorpio deep healing for you, even though there's this idea of boundaries and elimination, it's not just like deep, dark doom and gloom. It is still fun. There's this element where
Yes.
you bring joy into it. Can you tell us more about that kind of
Yeah.
joy element that you bring into the healing part?
Yeah. I think it's so ingrained that I don't even recognize it. So it's interesting that you're saying that. When I think about healing, I think like I get like a jump of excitement.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've had to be careful about using that word because not everybody gets that like jump of excitement when the word healing comes up.
Right.
And so to me, like experiencing those deeper layers of connection to ourselves is what really healing is to me, like the embodied healing of like, I'm going to be me no matter what. And I think that that came from when I was a child. I didn't feel like I could be me. Like I didn't feel like that was even really an option. And so thinking about when I removed that, when I moved and I allowed myself to just like start reinventing myself
Yeah.
and really learn who I am, that was super joyful for me, because before it was really sad because I couldn't, I almost like didn't speak because and I remember people calling me really shy and quiet, and I was like, that's so interesting because I don't feel shy and quiet. But it was because like my voice was cut off because I felt like I had to show up only a certain way. So if I have to be in a box, then I just close off. And
Yeah.
so when like as I've moved through my life and now in my 40s, like I feel like my 40s is like this time of like I don't know, like breaking out of even the box that was like outside
Yeah.
of the other box that I already broke out of. And so it's like this experience of joyful expansion
Mm-hmm.
that just like edifies my soul, I guess. And so I feel like this is how I am and this is how I have to be. Like if I have to live at all in a box in any way, even if it's just
Yeah.
like one thing I'm not allowed to say. That's why I paused earlier and said, can I curse? Because if I can't, then I have to like figure out how I'm censoring what I'm saying. And
Yeah.
it has some closeness to the way that you speak and present in your throat chakra. And so when I can just be myself, like how joyful is that to
Oh
not
my
have to
gosh.
censor even the smallest words.
There's a couple of things that I want to go back to with what you said. So first of all, that breaking the box, that you're in the box, right? I think when we had our Astrobrand reading, I'll have to double check the dates, but you were at the time and you're still going through the tail end of that Uranus
Yeah.
opposite Uranus. And so
Yes.
for all of us that have like, once you get into your early 40s, there is this transit called the Uranus opposite Uranus, which is like your midlife kind of crisis or something. But it's
Mhm.
basically this like literally like this cracking open, this
Mhm.
awakening. While a lot of people fear it, and while you're going through it, it's not exactly comfortable. It's like
Yeah.
you can actually see how you have more access to your truest nature now that you're like
Mhm.
outside, like you're over, like you're like out of like the deepest part of that Uranus opposite Uranus. Like
Yes.
we become more of ourselves. So I just want you to like be like, oh, okay, like that is definitely this one place for you that you're in. And then with your Chiron and Taurus, I want to come back to that story of where you're at now in terms of like not feeling safe to really be yourself.
Mhm.
um and like not finding your voice, because when we think about voice, Taurus is the ruler of our throat chakra, and
Mhm.
Chiron,
Yes.
the wounded healer, for the generation that has Chiron in Taurus, like early 40s, late 30s, you might have Chiron in Taurus. And Chiron in Taurus is like, it's not safe to use my voice. It's not safe to have, it's not safe to be worthy. And what I love to teach with this idea of Taurus is that these wounds that we've had from when we are children, our earliest experiences, they actually become our wisdom and our greatest gift of what we're supposed to be offering into the world. So can you tell us about a little bit of that story about your wounded healer, that your childhood experiences that kind of kept you from being visible and speaking
Oh,
about
yeah,
things?
absolutely. Yes. So when I was growing up, I remember this feeling of this weight on me that I felt like I had to be invisible. And it's only been recently that I've been able to really fully see it for what it was. Like for a long time, I just thought that I was supposed to be invisible. Like that's what was expected of me. And so to be as unseen as possible, because as I was growing up, I was a biracial Black. I am a biracial Black woman, but as a child in a small Midwestern town that literally was almost 100%, over 99% Caucasian, was very difficult, so to say. And so being invisible was my safety blanket. This is completely from my own perception, but it felt like I had to be a certain way to be accepted. And now as an adult, I understand that it was because my Blackness was being erased. So I needed to be as, we'll say, quote, white as possible, for lack of a better words. But just that through that time, I felt like I said earlier, like I wasn't allowed to be all of me, whether that was a story I made up or because of experiences I had where things that people said or things that people said behind my back that came back to me, or just the energy of how I felt with people. I never really felt safe growing up. And so it wasn't until I was in my 20s that I was even able to start seeing what that was, or like why that was. And I was in graduate school researching racial identity development and started healing that racial identity piece. And I feel like with this Uranus,
the Uranus opposite Uranus.
Yes, opposite. I always forget that word. I feel like with the Uranus opposite Uranus, like it's like shed this light on that like I started understanding that in my 20s, and now like I can see it. Like before it was just like a knowledge and a healing that I was going through, but now I feel like on the other side of it, like I can see how what some people call racial imposter syndrome, and just like this being of like not being able to be fully yourself, has really affected the way that I've shown up in my life. And now I don't necessarily, for a while I felt like I was needing to play catch up. I don't feel like I'm playing catch up anymore. I feel like what happened when I was a child deeply forms my work and my work within myself, my ability to see myself. And now I can energetically connect with myself and embody my truths in a different way than, of course, it would have been great to not have those wounds. But now, because of those wounds, I can embody a different layer and a different piece of this whole ability to work with people to help them heal their identity wounds and their visibility wounds on a totally different and energetic level.
I had a client the other day ask me, how do you get through Chiron? Right? Like, how do you get through your wounds? And I was like, you don't. Like, I was like, can you see how now those are like the silver linings? Like you needed these wounds in order to be these gifts, right? And you and I share that same experience being biracial. For me, it wasn't ever about like I didn't have to be invisible. For me, it was like always I had to blend. So I was always like trying to code switch, like whether I was like with my Japanese family trying to be more Asian, or my white family trying to be more white, or my Filipino family trying to be more brown. It was like I just couldn't ever fit in, and like learning like this identity of just always copying people instead. And so interesting how now in my work for my wounded healing, it's like no copying, no comparing. How do you be your unique self? And for your wounded healing, in terms of like, okay, being invisible and just like not sticking out, not using your voice, now to helping others expand their capacity to be seen and heard.
Yes. Yes.
So fascinating, isn't it?
Oh, it's incredible. It is so fascinating. And just that thought that we don't have to look at our wounds as problems. It's so empowering.
Yeah. And, you know, like, I think one of these things also that we learn as like maybe little girls and like we watch too many fairy tales or something, that life should just be all happy and easy. But
Yeah.
that's not really the full experience of being a human. And like part of that, the why we need so much healing is so we don't get stuck in those places of pain, of those places of hurt. But how do we gather what we're supposed to and take from it and empower ourselves to move forward? So I want to hear more about like what you do, because you do all kinds of things. You have like, you're a neuroscience coach, you have DNA activations, you have Reiki, you have so many different healing modalities. What exactly do you do to all these things together?
What I am piecing together and have been piecing together is this ability to cut the timeline. But what I mean by that is like to cut through all of the clutter and the junk that we can get really focused on, and we can get stuck in the analysis or the chatter, or just like the unawareness, like the lack of connection to the moment or to ourselves. And so through energy healing and helping my clients and myself, like helping us all find our flow, like through the neuroscience aspect. Like neuroscience doesn't have to be really like big or hard. It's about finding the flow through who we are, how we show up, and creating new pathways, by getting really mindful with ourselves, really aware with ourselves, and being able to really show up and see ourselves in a new way. And then we create these new neural pathways that say like, this is actually normal, like this is okay. It's not about like changing who we are or changing. I know a lot of people talk about like, if I could just get the step by step, or if I could just like find the right ways to do things, then I could do it. And then helping you see yourself, helping you like really like see what your flow is, what your step by step is, what works for you. And so as a previous therapist and counselor, I always felt like I was missing something with my clients. And I started doing energy healing work, and like the world came wide open, because it's like we have these abilities to work to a certain extent within our therapy or our processing, our talking. But when we can go in and do the energy healing, which to me is energetically connecting. What I specifically do is I energetically connect with your energy through your lifetimes, through your ancestry, and what I call spirit guides or deities, and connect in a way that I can go in and see, as if you were sitting on a table or laying on a table in front of me. I've had clients call it like they feel like I'm performing energetic surgery. And so it feels like I'm going in and I'm seeing the problems, like diagnosing, like you've said before, like diagnosing what's wrong, and then literally energetically helping your system, your physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, like helping your system be able to flow in a way that works for you, and for you to be able to connect with that and see that and experience that. Because sometimes it's just about like removing or clearing the pieces that are no longer serving you, or that aren't even yours, whether you're super empathic and you're holding on to other people's things or emotions, or it came from ancestral. Like I believe that we hold generational. I've been reading some research lately about these generational woundings that go through our bloodline. And so I'm not saying that I'm changing your bloodline, but I can help clear out and remove some of what's holding you back in this lifetime to be able to heal some of that. And going back to the idea of timelines, it feels like we're collapsing timelines because when we add energy work to coaching and counseling and therapy, we are doing like a whole new way of creating healing journeys, of processes and pathways to healing. So it just takes so much less time to move through things that, I mean, if I would have had energy healing when I was in my 20s, I don't even know what I would have done. Like that would have been incredible to my healing journey. And so since I started really like adding this in and doing it for myself, and that's what I started doing differently this year. It was, I started having an intentional self energy healing practice at least once a day. Whereas before it was just whenever I thought of it or I needed it. But seeing how like energy healing helps even when you don't think you need it, just like going to a coach or a counselor, even if you're having a really good day, can really help.
For the neuroscience, is the neuroscience coaching part, is that part of the DNA activation? Is it also like an energy healing, or is that something else?
No, I worked with Shantae Javon Taylor. I'll throw out a name. Shantae Javon Taylor has a Optimind Institute, and she is a neuroscience who teaches and trains coaches, leaders, therapists, anyone really, to use neuroscience with their clients. And so she coaches us on how to use the wisdom of neuroscience and be able to relate it to whoever it is that we're working with. And so because I have that, like having all of these different pieces and putting them together, it to me just like serves this like broader capacity of understanding of the human body and the human experience to be able to really show up for my clients in a different way. Like I feel like putting the DNA activation is energy healing, obviously, but it from my experience goes way deeper than like your like Reiki, or it's like a one-time thing. It's something that I'm going in and really like going into the molecular structure of your spiritual DNA that affects all of your DNA, not just your spiritual DNA.
Can you see it? How do you feel it when you're like working with somebody?
So it's been really interesting because like every time I do it and the more I practice it, like my intuition just gets clearer. And so in the beginning, it was more of like a knowing. I could just like know that there was something happening here, and I started to kind of see it. But throughout this process, now I can, it's almost like I really feel like you're in the room with me, and I see like with my eyes closed, like see your body in front of me, and I can see like different seals and things that have created like almost like it looks like plaque to me, plaque on your DNA strands, on your chakras, just like throughout your energy. So then I'm removing those, and these could have happened, you know, generations ago or lifetimes ago, depending on what the situation is. And so I'm coming in and removing all of this, then coming in with all of my background of like therapy and coaching, but then adding in the neuroscience piece so I can help you find your flow in a new way, and your connection to your intuition in a new way that we don't always think about, because it's so simple. When I put it all together, it feels really simple to me. But when I use the words like DNA activation in neuroscience, like it sounds really complex. But it's just like cutting back all of the extra and just like finding what works specifically for you and what needs to be cleared out, and then how I can help you realign your neural pathways to create these new pathways to the success that is yours, not anyone else's.
Yes. Can I share? I had maybe about, how long ago was this already? Like 7 or 8 years ago, I had a friend who also did DNA cleansing and activation. And I there's certain times now that I consider myself very intuitive, especially when I'm looking at a
Yeah.
star chart. I can see things come through. Um, but at that time I was very, very clouded. There's like just like no way. And he was like saying like, oh my goodness, you have all of these like, because I don't know what else to describe them as, like, by except for worms. And he's standing just like around me, and he's like pulling these like worms out of me with like just the energetic worms out of
Yes.
me. And I swear to God, it was just like I could feel them come out, and I was like so freaked out by the experience. But then he's
Oh
like,
no.
he had to do it like there was like 2 times and he had to do it. And I was like, how is this possible that I can feel like these energetic worms just being like extracted? And so
Yeah.
I having those DNA activations, like it's so hard to like exactly put to words of what it is, but
Yeah.
I believe you when you say like you can see it like pieces of plaque or like stuckness or things like are that are just
Mm-hmm.
on our energetic and our etheric bodies that just prevent
Yes.
us from doing things.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Absolutely. Yeah.
that's crazy.
Yeah, I love that you had that experience. He explained it in that way. I know it sounds like it was really like kind of a scary experience, but like looking back on it, I'm sure the
It
power that came from it.
it was so funny because he would pull one out, and like I mean I couldn't see it, but I felt it. It was so weird.
It's
And
so
you could feel
interesting.
it, and he would like spray it with this sage water. And I was like,
Oh
nobody could
wow.
believe what is going on.
Yes. So one thing about me is that I'm already super like practical or very
Mm-hmm.
grounded, down to earth thinker. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think that's why it's really easy for me to connect things like neuroscience and shaman resiliency work and DNA activation and Reiki and other forms of energy healing and all of the different things I've done. Like now it just feels like my body of work is kind of presented in front of me so that I can help people make things like the etheric body really practical,
Yeah.
because it doesn't, or neuroscience or whatever it is, really practical, because I know I used to, and people I talk
Mm-hmm.
to tend to make it really complicated. And so my goal is just to help people move through life in a much simpler and less chaotic and complex way, and find our flow in a way that really honors who we are and the work that we're here to do.
Yeah.
So many of us, including myself, have been in this place of not really showing up for our work. And I'm not talking about like the work that you don't want to do, but not really even seeing the work that is just flowing out of you on a day-to-day basis. And if you could just live with this work flowing out of you, like how beautiful that is.
Oh my goodness. Yes. Like I see your, the DNA activation or your shamanism or the neuroscience or the Reiki, like all of these for you is kind of your energetic toolbox. Like literally they're
Mm-hmm.
tools,
Yeah.
right? Because with your sun
Yes.
in Virgo and your Saturn in Virgo and your North Node in Virgo, like with all that Virgo energy, since we are in Virgo season, it's about,
Yeah.
I've been starting to call it like the healing priestess. She's
Ooh.
healing the soil, and our soils are literally like our bodies and our vessels. And
Yeah.
like if we're thinking about like a farmer who's like, they have their shovel and their backhoe and like all of their tools. For you have your energetic tools, and it's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, somebody's coming in who needs to be radically nurtured, to be seen and heard. It's like, oh,
Yes.
you intuitively choose the tool that you'll need for that particular job, that particular healing
Exactly.
session.
Exactly. That's how I feel too. And that's why I think I've really had a hard time explaining what I do, because literally I'm doing something different for everyone. Like I'm
Yeah.
diagnosing what tool and then picking the tool that's needed for what the diagnosis is, if we want to look at it that way. And so
Yeah.
just going through that for myself helps me see like how other people overcomplicate, or like just the tools in general, like you
Mm-hmm.
said, like that's so simple to look at it that way. But if we're looking at it as big concepts, then we're not able to really see it for what it is, so we can use our gifts and skills and abilities and strengths, for ourselves and our clients. Yeah.
Well, one of the things with your ideal customer, and that you already know the shadow side of, when you're talking about just this inability to nurture yourself, with your ideal customers having that kind of Cancer archetype with Jupiter there, and also with Leo, we can call them the creative caretakers or something like that.
Yeah.
They're so focused on caring for others that they completely forget how to nurture themselves. And then you come in and you have your big toolbox, but your toolbox, if we're going to still play with the harvest priestess kind of analogy, your toolbox is like you're weeding things out, like you're literally taking out all the pests and everything like that, that's like preventing the
Yeah.
soil from growing. But then you're also building the fences and the trellises, like the structures for which people to grow, because you have that Saturn in Virgo there. So you're like
Mm,
really important about like structures and boundaries. And so how do we then erect the fence that's going to protect this soil that we've now renourished?
yes. Oh, that's really incredible way to say it.
Yeah,
Thank
that's
you.
that's
I
your
love that.
that's your energetic makeup.
Yes, I feel so seen right now.
Oh my gosh, you are seen. I love it. And
Yes.
it's really, I understand it's really hard, especially when we're doing these kinds of like very esoteric things that people don't maybe understand. And how do we talk about it in a way that like puts a little bit of analogy on it, or a little bit of metaphor on it, so that we can
Mhm.
more easily talk about it and like more easily be understood? Because sometimes, like,
Yes.
right, those concepts are so intangible. How do we bring them? How do
Mhm.
we ground them? So
Mhm. Yes,
I
thank
wanted
you.
I wanted to talk to you about your story, about like how you actually became more visible when you decided to step
Yeah.
back from being visible.
I have no words. I was like really fighting it because I've been feeling it for a while. I had played around with closing my practice. I had played around with taking a break, a real break, but nothing really felt safe. And so, like, knowing that safety was a real driving force for me, and needing that healing of being able to really allow my safety to be there rather than trying to make it happen, was a
Yeah.
big turning point for me too. And so if I would have said, I'm going to take a sabbatical, there's no way I would have done it. Or I'm going to sell my car, I'm going to close my practice, or I'm going to stop promoting myself or marketing or doing whatever it was. Of course, I did a little marketing here and there as it felt good, but
Mhm.
it was like one post,
Yes.
in the midst of weeks or months. And so, and there was nothing attached to it. That was another key that I realized out of that, was that I had a lot of attachment to the way I showed up online and even in person, or however I was showing up. There was attachment to getting something in return, and that
Mhm.
scarcity of like not having enough safety.
Mhm.
And that translates to money, to energy, to work. And so when I cut back, and it was in layers, right? So it started early fall. My counseling and coaching practice I closed in October and decided to go all in with my energy work, but within like weeks I was like, I actually need a break.
Mhm.
It wasn't until after I started taking the break that I realized I was severely burnt out, just like living in cycles of burnout. And like my business was almost like responding in trauma triggers. Like I had started my business while I was going through some trauma. And so
Mhm.
I was like creating this traumatic business experience. And I
Mm.
think probably a lot of people do that more than we realize. So I'm in this burnout. I'm reacting in trauma reaction ways. And then just like having to step back, like there was just no other option. But of course there was. I could have chose to just continue down the path and continue to feel unwell and everything else I was feeling. So I cut back
Mhm.
all the way. And when I did, like through this process, probably a few weeks or months in, I
Mhm.
started realizing that people had been reaching out to me. So then I started to take note of it because it was
Yeah.
happening. I just didn't know it. And so I started seeing how the more I was taking care of myself and nourishing myself and really like allowing my healing to happen and come to the surface, the more people were saying like, hey, I was thinking of you. Do you need anything? Or hey, are you still doing this? Or something like, are you doing coaching? Are you doing energy? Or something that I hadn't even ever said that I was doing.
Yeah.
Big things started to
All those
happen.
invitations started
Yes,
flowing
all
in.
of these
Yeah.
invitations. And so I know that that's also part of my human design, is like responding to invitations. And so as I cut back and energetically took care of myself, my energy, what became my visibility, right? And so then when I did show up online, it was like more massive or magnifying. And people who didn't even see that felt the energy of it, is what I finally come to realize. And I would have never experienced that had I not thrown up my hands and said, I'm not doing my life or my work this way.
Yes.
And I have no idea what else to do or how my rent is going to get paid, but I'm going to do it anyway and make it work. And so I have sustained myself through invitations. And then I realized through that process that there had been this piece of my business, of my work, of doing visibility coaching and energy healing around visibility that I had already been doing, but I didn't realize how much of a focal point that was becoming. So how ridiculous is it that I was in this place of not being visible? And then all of a sudden I feel this calling on my life to be a visibility coach and healer. And I was like, how is that going to happen? Like, no one even knows who I am right now because I'm not showing up. So I went through that process of realizing how much I really was showing up, because showing up for myself is showing up for other people. And then the people that I am showing up for are like blown away by my work and by the energy that they felt while they were working with me. So then they are able to then go tell other people that I'm someone that is doing this work. And so if I wasn't taking care of my energy, or when I wasn't, like I didn't have that same level of word of mouth kind of referral kind of marketing. So it becomes a whole new process.
Oh my gosh, I love that so much, because I see it also reflected in your chart in this way, right? Because you have all of this Scorpio energy, you have that healing energy of the Virgo, that embodiment, but then because of that Saturn and your Capricorn rising, there's still like, you have to protect your energy. And protecting your energy is literally getting rid of stuff. Okay. It's not about adding stuff. It's about saying no to stuff. And so the more you can say no to things for yourself by saying like, I'm not going to be on social media for just willy-nilly things. I'm not going to talk to it like just be on marketing because I feel like people just need to know my name. It's like when you trust yourself, when you create your boundaries, that like little container, and get rid of all the distractions, extract all those distractions, you show up for yourself and you show up more brightly. And this idea about visibility and like having X amount of followers or doing all the things or showing up consistently, we all have to decide what consistency means for us. For consistency for you, April, consistency means like showing up when I feel like it, when my energy matches it, when I have done my own healing and grounding work and my own elimination work. Like like I just see this for you, it's like this elimination work is like just so big. Like you're just like such this gracious being, like that just absorbs all these things. You're like, no, I gotta take it out. I gotta take it out. Like as my hands are flying, if people can't really hear on the podcast, my hands flying away. But I think that's so beautiful. And it's so important for us to practice what we preach, because I know we were talking too. I've been taking some time off, and even though I'm in the middle of delivering some programs right now, when I had these programs being offered, I was like, you know what? I'm not going to send all these launch emails. I'm not going to send you 100 emails. Like, if you want to take this, you're going to get 2 emails. If you're really called to it, please come in, because I can't be scattering my energy like this. Like, if you want to work with me and you're called to what we have here, like just come in. And people responded.
And I felt like so energetically drawn that you didn't have to send another email. I had to find a way to make it work in that moment, because I knew that the energy felt right. And
Yes.
I love that. One thing I love about working with you has been, and in your newest programs has been just, and what I've done with you before, is just this feeling of simplicity. And that's something that I've realized this year, is that I was not as careful about who I allowed to be in my ear or in my life in that capacity, because the way that you show up is really simple. And the way that you explain things, I feel so like it's so easy to understand things that I couldn't quite grasp before, to be honest. Like, I've been looking at astrology and all of a sudden I talk to Leslie, or she teaches a class, and I'm like, oh, that totally, I didn't get that part, but that's why I didn't get this, this, and this. Now it all makes sense. And so the way that you showed up for that launch was just so powerful to me as I was going through my own process of like, can I just send one email for a launch, or do I have to send the 10 email funnel, and how does this all work?
Just
And
hearing that makes me shut down.
just the exhaustion. Yes.
Yeah.
So
there has to be an easier way. And I especially like in the second Virgo season of this pandemic, where there's just been all this uncertainty and people just can't, I feel like we're all just like so broken right now.
Yeah.
That like, of course, life still has to go on and we're still in creation and we still want to do all these things, but there has to be things that are like scaled back and that are just true to our unique energies. So it's so beautiful to hear how you've stepped into your energy healing and how you're still going to amplify that literally by setting boundaries and eliminating all the other stuff that you don't need.
Yes, it's so freeing. And, you know, I live my life very simply, but I didn't realize how complicated I had made my work life, my business life. And it's easy to separate those things. And so just like finding more systems and flow and ways to be simple.
I love
just
it.
Feels like a breath of fresh air.
And then, you know, looking also going back to your chart again, just with that kind of process, because like for April's chart, she has everything in the 7th, 8th, and 9th house, like almost everything is just like stacked up right there. And so, you know, like right around your birthday time and that month after your birthday, like that's a hard time for you. Like just, you know, just kind of ongoing always. Like you literally what you said,
it really
I feel burnt out. And then you feel like you just have to like transform. And then once you allow yourself to do that, then the connections happen, right? Because you have just in close succession, Sun, Saturn, Mars, Pluto, Virgo, and in that order. And so those planets all for you, and every time they always get aligned in that way. So you get like creativity, and then you get contraction. No, I can't. And then you're like, but why can't I? And then you flame out, burn out. And then this transformation happens, and then you're like, oh, I'm connected again. And it's for you, it's that same system, because the way of how your planets are organized.
Oh, absolutely. That's 100%. I had no idea that that's what that meant, but that's so true. I can think back for years and years of that cycle. So
just know that that is cycle. So like, so now when you come to this place of contraction, that place of like, after your creative vibrancy, you're like, okay, I only have, like, for example, if we're going to put it like in a monetary case, like I only have $5 at the grocery store today. What can I buy for $5? Right. So you put your boundaries on it, like what's going to like make the biggest impact. And then that way your Mars doesn't have to inflame for you to do the transformation. You can instead change that Mars into like motivation. And then that kind of, and the amplification with Pluto. So like once you start to flip those, instead of feeling contracted, like, oh, I'm trapped, you're like, no, I'm free because I know how much I have to spend.
Yes. I love it.
Oh my
that
gosh.
makes absolute sense.
And then I have a few little questions for you. And
Okay.
then after that, I would love for people to be able to find out more about you and how they can experience some of your energy toolkits, your toolbox.
Yeah.
But first, the fun question. So, of course, we've been talking about spirituality and energy healing. These are my star questions. So the S is for spirituality. What spiritual practices do you use in your business?
Oh, goodness. I use meditation, ritual, which is a full gamut of things, but I tend to like candles a lot, use some like sage or other types of things, just to clear my space and like trigger to my brain that I'm shifting into my spiritual practice right now.
Yeah.
I use self Reiki and all of these things that I do for myself, then I'm preparing to do that for others. So I feel like when I wasn't doing that, it just like there was a different connection. And so then when I'm showing up in my work, I'm also doing that for my clients and teaching them how to do that as well.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah.
So it's so funny. Like I think I need to update that question. Like, how do you use it on a daily practice or something? Because we're all using so many
Yeah.
spiritual tools.
Yeah.
Um, so for the T is for thanks. And we kind of talked about this already, but if in like in a little description,
Mhm.
what challenges did you overcome for which you are now grateful?
Yes, the opportunity, go through a deep healing process and
Mm.
see the joy in it, and see like when it was muddy and hard and shadowy and dark, like being able to come on the other side of it, just like going through the whole inner healing work and racial identity work was powerful. And in the middle of it, it's been really hard. But I'm really thankful for the opportunity, and not in a like super sugary coated way, but just looking back at how powerful that is in my life now, that I have that experience to inform how I show up now.
Yeah, how you needed it. Oh, that's so
Yeah.
beautiful. So thankful to all of those shadows and the deep healing journey.
Yes.
Um, A is for activism. So, what
Yes.
social impact do you want to make through your business?
Yeah. So again, many things. The thing that is, of course, super near and dear to my heart is multiracial and biracial experience, like really allowing that to be an experience. We don't often look at that as its own experience, but just
Mhm.
looking at what that is and giving voice to it. I know just a really small thing. Well, it's not small, but I used to think it was. When I moved to Wisconsin and had to get my license, I had to decide if I was white or black. And they were like, well, when you were 16, you were white. And I was like, I don't remember filling that out, but okay. So then I just got my license a few days ago, renewed, and it was my first renewal since I moved here. And race, I don't know if they allowed me to have two or they just chose it. I didn't ask, but
Yeah.
it wasn't a big piece. Like I was able to choose two races.
More than
I
one
didn't have to choose one,
or
which I know
other.
that, which, yes. And I feel like that is activism in itself, just like knowing that there is more than one racial experience, and like helping people who don't quite understand that but have that experience, to allow that to show up, like to allow ourselves to show up in the fullness of who we are, and heal that, I'll say monoracial, like not in a bad way, but in a like allowing ourselves to really be biracial or mixed and own like every facet of who we are is really important to me.
Oh, that's so great. So, really understanding that, like living in your own, I want to say color, but I mean color in terms of like there are so many colors. Like you don't
Yes,
have to like
yes.
choose just one, and that being the
Yeah,
social impact. Okay,
yeah.
so R for star, the last letter radiate. R is for radiate.
Hmm.
How do you want to inspire others to shine brightly?
I just want to inspire others to really see their brilliance and allow that to just radiate out of them. That it doesn't have to be constricted, even if their brilliance doesn't fit the norm or the box that they think it should, but just being able to just own every piece of ourselves and find our own way, our own journey and pathway through life.
So beautiful. Oh my goodness. So April, please share with us what you have coming up. How can people work with you and get in touch with you?
Yes. So I have individual energy healing and intuitive coaching that I do with individuals. And that is something that's always happening. That's always on my list of offerings. I love helping people work through issues in their business. And so it doesn't always have to be something that's with your business. But what I find is when people come to me, usually whatever it is that we're doing greatly impacts their entrepreneurial journey in some way. And I'm working on a new program, which I haven't fully owned a name for yet, but I will be putting it out there into the world within the next couple of weeks, where it's going to be a hybrid of individual and group work that we're going to do together to find the flow within your mind, body, and spirit connection. Like helping you really, really, truly, deeply trust yourself and get into your simplistic patterns and anchoring into the radiance that wants to come out of you. So that's going to be a hybrid group and one-on-one program, like I said, that's going to be launched in the next couple of weeks.
That is so incredible. I love that your North Node is in the 8th house. So working with intimate groups, that is so there's this like trust and power that comes from the groups that you'll work with. So it's so beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh my goodness. So thank you, April, for sharing all of your Healing Priestess stories and gifts with us. It's been such a pleasure.
I so appreciate it. Thank you for the time.
You're welcome, April. If you love this podcast, please consider doing me a favor and heading over to Apple iTunes and leaving me a rating and review. Your rating and review helps this humble podcast get seen and found by more listeners like you. Please share the love.